Okay, so just put yourself in that Coconut Grove hotel room for a second. You have O.J. Simpson. He walks in late, and he's having a hard time even getting to his feet because of a bum knee.
Right. He's looking older, looking heavier.
Yeah. But then he offers his hand to the ghostwriter, Pablo Fenjves. And Pablo actually notes in his own internal monologue that O.J.'s hand feels as big as a baseball mitt.
Oh, wow.
So the physical intimidation is just immediate. And before anyone can even settle into their chairs, like before the pleasantries are finished or a glass of water is even poured, O.J. leans over the table and asks him aggressively, "Tell me something. What is this wailing dog bullshit? You ever hear of anyone putting a man away based on the testimony of a wailing dog?"
I mean, it is just the most surreal, confrontational way to establish a working relationship I can possibly imagine.
Totally.
But to fully grasp why that specific question is so loaded, we really need to look at who Pablo Fenjves actually was before he ever took this ghostwriting gig.
Right. He wasn't just some random author.
No, not at all. He wasn't selected out of a Rolodex by a publishing house. Pablo lived on Gretna Greenway. That is literally one street over from Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium on Bundy. They shared a back alley.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and during the 1995 criminal trial, Pablo was actually a key witness for the prosecution. He took the stand under oath and testified about hearing Nicole's Akita letting out this plaintive, unusual wail around 10.15 or 10.20 on the night of the murders.
Right.
Marcia Clark used his exact testimony to lock in the timeline for the killings.
Which makes digging through the stack of sources you sent us, like these original publisher notes and the unvarnished 2006 manuscript drafts of If I Did It, so incredibly fascinating.
It really is.
Because our mission today is to decode what is essentially a psychological artifact.
Yeah.
You're looking at a text where O.J. Simpson sits down in a room to give a so-called hypothetical confession to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
Yeah.
And he chooses to dictate it to the very man who helped the prosecution try to put him on death row.
The psychology of that choice alone is just staggering.
It's crazy.
OJ is asserting dominance. He is looking across the table at a man who tried to put him in a cage, and he's essentially saying, well, now you work for me. Now you are going to write down my version of reality.
I can't get past the fundamental logic of this deal from the corporate side, though. Hiring the prosecutor's star witness to write your alibi is bizarre enough, but how does a major publisher even greenlight the financial mechanics of this?
Real.
Because we are talking about Judith Reagan and News Corp here. They had to know they were stepping into an absolute ethical minefield.
You'd think so, but the lure of a guaranteed blockbuster creates a phenomenal amount of corporate blindness.
Right.
The publisher and the broader corporate umbrella News Corp, which owned the Fox network set to air the companion TV interview, they saw pure, unprecedented synergy. They were anticipating millions of book sales and record-breaking television ratings.
Yeah, just massive numbers.
Exactly. And that profit motive completely eclipsed any moral reservation about paying a man who had been found civilly liable for a double homicide. Yeah. And because of that civil liability, the financial structure had to be an absolute maze.
Let's break that maze down, actually. Because the notes you highlighted show O.J. went on this massive PR campaign claiming he wasn't making a single dime off the book.
Right.
He framed it as this selfless act, claiming the profits were going to a shell corporation set up strictly for his children, Sydney and Justin.
Yeah, that was the public-facing narrative. But the reality hidden in the financial documents tells a much darker story. The money was indeed funneled into a third-party shell company to evade the laws preventing criminals from cashing in on their crimes.
Right.
And to legally dodge the massive civil judgment owed to the Goldman family. But O.J. later admitted in private conversations with Pablo that he was quietly siphoning funds from that exact shell company to pay down his Florida mortgage and settle his own massive tax debts with the IRS.
He is literally using his motherless children as a financial shield.
Yeah.
He sets up a corporate entity in their names to launder blood money, pays off his own tax liens, and then demands the public view him as a financially strapped martyr. The audacity is off the charts.
It really is. And setting up that level of cognitive dissonance is actually the perfect primer for the manuscript itself.
Oh, for sure.
Because Pablo realized very quickly that you don't just walk into a hotel room and say, okay, OJ, tell me how you slashed 2 people to death.
Right. You can't start there.
Exactly. They had to build up to it. They had to start with his history with Nicole. Pablo called it the easy stuff. But structurally, the early chapters are a masterclass in reversing victimhood.
I was reading those early drafts,
Mm.
and he completely rewrites the entire dynamic of the marriage.
Oh, he weaponizes the narrative. In OJ's prose, he is this infinitely patient, stoic husband desperately trying to hold his fractured family together.
Right.
He paints Nicole as the antagonist, erratic, deeply obsessed with her physical appearance, and increasingly reliant on drugs. He points to her socializing with people he deems marginal characters, specifically naming Faye Resnick and Kato Kalin as evidence of her spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
But most aggressively, he insists time and time again that she was the primary aggressor who initiated their physical altercations.
Look, I get trying to spin your image, but how on earth does he attempt to explain away the infamous 1989 New Year's Eve incident?
Oh.
Because the whole world heard the 911 tape. The police arrived to find Nicole beaten, bruised, and hiding in the bushes, screaming that he was going to kill her. You can't just hand-wave that away.
No, but he attempts to neutralize it by turning it into a story about irrational female jealousy.
No, right.
He synthesizes a highly sanitized version of events for Pablo. According to the text, the entire altercation started at a holiday party because Marcus Allen had purchased a pair of diamond earrings for his girlfriend. OJ claims Nicole flew into a hysterical rage, utterly convinced that OJ had secretly bought a matching pair of earrings for a mistress.
Wait, his defense for a documented domestic assault is that his wife was hallucinating phantom jewelry?
That is his literal defense. He claims they returned to the Rockingham estate and Nicole became physically violent, demanding the non-existent earrings, swinging wildly and kicking him.
Wow.
He writes that he merely wrestled her out of the bedroom and locked the door to protect himself. He adamantly denies throwing a single punch, framing the entire incident as a husband simply trying to de-escalate an unhinged partner.
But the police report directly contradicts that. He was documented screaming at the responding officers, "I've got 2 other women." That is a matter of public record.
Yeah, but he has a rationalization for that, too.
Of course he does.
He tells Pablo the quote was maliciously taken out of context by the LAPD. He claims he wasn't bragging about mistresses to the cops. He says he was referring to the family nanny and the housekeeper who were asleep inside the house. And he was simply yelling to assure Nicole that the baby was safe with the, quote, 2 other women.
The psychological gymnastics required to put that in print are staggering.
Yeah.
I mean, he is sitting across from his ghostwriter, demanding that the reader view him as the ultimate poster boy for false abuse allegations.
Yes.
He wants you to believe he was terrorized by a hysterical wife and framed by an overzealous police department years before the murders even happened.
And building that specific foundation of the wronged protective father is a structural necessity for the book. It creates the thematic bridge he uses to justify the events of June 12, 1994.
Ah, that's right.
By spending chapters establishing that Nicole's lifestyle, the alleged drugs, and the shady friends was an active, imminent threat to his children's well-being, he gives himself the psychological permission to act.
Which takes us to the night of the murders and the introduction of the single most bizarre element of this entire hypothetical confession.
To accomplice.
Yes, the accomplice. Because even in a space where he is ostensibly taking responsibility, he outright refuses to say he acted alone.
Right. Recording the murder chapter was incredibly difficult. OJ repeatedly told Pablo, "You know I couldn't have done this alone." Yet he absolutely refused to name the person who supposedly accompanied him.
Yeah.
When Pablo finally pressed him on how to write the scene without a name, OJ became dismissive.
He just shrugs and tells him, call him whatever the fuck you want. So Pablo literally invents the name Charlie.
Exactly. And Charlie becomes the narrative catalyst. According to the manuscript, Charlie arrives at the Rockingham estate on the evening of June 12th, bearing gossip.
Okay.
He tells OJ he overheard some people discussing Nicole and Faye Resnick throwing kinky drug parties down in Cabo. This rumor is the spark.
Yeah.
OJ describes flying into a self-righteous rage. He decides he has to drive to the Bundy condo immediately to, in his own words, scare the shit out of her.
But if the goal is just to scare her, the preparation makes zero sense. He grabs a dark knit cap, he grabs leather gloves, and he reaches under the seat of his Bronco for a knife. And not just any knife, but a limited edition blade. He specifically tells Pablo he only kept in the vehicle to deal with the crazies in Los Angeles.
The escalation is chilling. He details parking in the dark alley behind her condo. He specifically notes that the rear security gate is broken, adding a petty grievance that he had told Nicole 1,000,000 times to get it fixed.
Unbelievable.
He sneaks into the narrow, confined courtyard. He sees candles burning through the window, hears music, and his paranoia takes over. He assumes she's setting the mood for a lover or waiting for a drug dealer.
And then the squeaky back gate opens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Ron Goldman walking in just to return a pair of sunglasses that Nicole's mother had left at Mizzaluna earlier that night.
OJ writes that he doesn't believe the sunglasses story for a second. He confronts Ron, accusing him of being there for drugs or sex.
And the tension here shatters. The text describes Nicole opening the front door in a slinky cocktail dress. OJ starts screaming at her. Nicole fiercely defends her home, swinging at him and screaming at him to get the fuck off her property.
Yeah.
OJ claims she loses her balance, falls backwards, and hits her head violently on the concrete stoop. And when Ron Goldman sees this happen, OJ writes that Ron drops into a karate stance.
He literally refers to it as karate shit.
Yeah.
Ron Goldman starts bobbing and weaving, trying to defend himself. OJ challenges him. And right at this precipice, right as the lethal violence is about to begin, we hit the most calculated narrative device in the entire manuscript.
The blackout.
Yes. OJ introduces a psychological blackout.
He claims that something went horribly wrong. His memory just magically evaporates.
Yeah.
He describes feeling like a chunk of his life was suddenly missing, and when he finally snaps back to reality, the fight is over.
Right.
He's standing there, covered in blood, holding a bloody knife, with Nicole and Ron dead at his feet. Holy shit. It is literally the yada 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 of murder confessions.
It really is.
He walks up with a weapon, gets insanely angry, someone gets in a karate stance, blackout, and oh look, 2 people are brutally slaughtered. It is the most convenient case of amnesia in the history of true crime literature.
And the paradox of that amnesia is what makes the text so fascinating to analyze. He claims a total dissociative fugue for the gruesome mechanics of the murders themselves.
Yeah.
But the moment the bodies are on the ground, his memory snaps back with hyper-specific, meticulous clarity. There is zero amnesia regarding the escape.
The logistical details he feeds Pablo are wild. He remembers peeling off his bloody clothes in the dark alley, but he specifically notes that he left his socks on because he couldn't see any blood on the fabric.
Exactly.
He maps out the precise evasion route he drove home, taking a left at the end of the alley onto Montana Avenue, then a right onto Gretna Green. He even recalls standing in the shower back at Rockingham and knowing the airport limo driver had arrived at the front gate because the bottom light on his intercom phone system lit up.
He is providing logistical minutia that only the killer fleeing that specific crime scene could possibly possess. But he isn't just recounting a story for the sake of thoroughness. He is methodically engineering a trapdoor into his own confession.
Let's pull the thread on that because this is where the manipulation reaches a completely different level.
We have to look at the timeline of the fallout. Months after the manuscript is finished, word leaks to the press. The public reaction is absolute revulsion.
Oh yeah, people were furious.
Rupert Murdoch realizes the brand damage is catastrophic and cancels the project. OJ starts feeling the intense heat of this media backlash, and he calls Pablo Fenjves on the phone. During this call, OJ casually reveals that he purposely seeded physical mistakes throughout the text.
That is fucking insane. He dictates a double homicide, but purposefully gets things wrong.
Deliberately. He tells Pablo, I treated it as fiction. I purposefully didn't correct some of the mistakes because if the time comes that I have to defend myself, I can say, hey, look, it can't be me because that couldn't have happened. He specifically points to the details we just discussed. Leaving his socks on in a courtyard covered in blood without tracking it everywhere. The physical impossibility of him scaling a 10-foot chain-link fence in his condition to get back onto his estate, and wearing a thick, dark-knit cap while playing golf earlier that afternoon.
So he is baking plausible deniability directly into the manuscript.
It's like a magician making sure there is a highly visible, clumsy string attached to a levitating prop. If anyone ever accuses him of actually possessing supernatural powers, he can just point to the string and say, don't be ridiculous, look at the string, it's obviously just a trick.
Right.
He wanted to collect the paycheck for a confession while retaining the ability to legally and publicly dismiss the entire thing as a ghostwriter's fantasy.
The manipulation doesn't stop with the murders either. He uses this book to rewrite the psychology of the most famous police chase in American history. We all have the visual burned into our brains, Al Cowlings driving the white Bronco slowly down the 405 freeway, followed by a parade of police cruisers.
Yeah.
In the book, OJ takes us inside the cab of that truck.
Right.
He claims he was in the back with a loaded magnum resting in his lap, fully committed to pulling the trigger to end his own emotional pain. He even includes the text of a suicide note, pleading with the public to please think of the real OJ and not this lost person.
He paints a portrait of profound, suicidal despair, but the catalyst that snaps him out of it is incredibly revealing. They had the radio playing in the Bronco, and CBS News anchor Dan Rather comes on the air broadcasting the chase live.
Yeah.
But Rather isn't just giving logistical updates. He starts analyzing.
Wait, don't tell me. He brings up the LAPD records.
The domestic abuse records.
Yeah.
Spot on. Dan Rather starts broadcasting OJ's documented history of wife beating to the entire country.
And this entirely breaks OJ's brain. He is sitting in the back of a truck, purportedly seconds away from blowing his own brains out due to overwhelming grief, and he hears the media discussing his police record.
Yep.
His depression evaporates in a millisecond. It transmutes into pure, unadulterated fury. He starts screaming at the radio, "You ain't learned shit, motherfucker!"
The prospect of a negative public relations narrative was vastly more terrifying to him than the prospect of a bullet.
Exactly.
He becomes so utterly incensed by the media coverage that he decides he absolutely must live. He puts the magnum down because his ego cannot bear the thought of dying and letting the press dictate his legacy unchecked.
His ego was literally a stronger force of nature than suicidal ideation.
Oh.
It is the most narcissistic justification for choosing life I have ever encountered.
Which perfectly aligns with the visceral public backlash when Barbara Walters read the advance copy and called the murder chapter absolutely chilling. The public wasn't just reacting to the gory details, they were reacting to the sheer commodification of grief. News Corp tried to force synergy on a tragedy, and it blew up in their faces.
And when Rupert Murdoch finally pulls the plug on the book and the television special, OJ's immediate reflex is to throw Pablo Fenjves straight to the wolves. He goes on television and claims the ghostwriter fabricated the entire thing.
Of course.
He tells the cameras, when I saw what the ghostwriter wrote, I said, maybe you did it, because they're saying that chapter contains things only the killer would know. He tries to pivot the suspicion onto the man he hired.
But the irony of the legal system finally caught up with him. Because OJ had hidden the book's rights inside that shell corporation for his kids, the Goldman family's lawyers are able to petition a bankruptcy court.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They argued that the shell corporation was a fraudulent vehicle designed to hide OJ's assets. The judge agreed, dissolved the corporation, and awarded the complete rights of the manuscript to the family of Ron Goldman.
The ultimate poetic justice. The Goldmans took the book, published it themselves, kept all the profits, and redesigned the cover so the word "if" was hidden inside the eye. They turned his tool for manipulation into a permanent monument to his guilt.
When you strip away the publishing drama and the legal maneuvering, this text serves as a textbook clinical case study of malignant narcissism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every hallmark is present. The profound lack of empathy, the grandiose need for admiration, and the pathological rewriting of reality to protect the fragile ego.
Right. Yeah.
Even in a space where he is hypothetically admitting to a double slaughter, he simply cannot resist portraying himself as the ultimate victim. He is the victim of Nicole's lifestyle, the victim of the LAPD, the victim of Dan Rather's broadcast, and the victim of a rogue author.
We've spent this time looking at the hidden mechanics of a killer desperately trying to monetize his own brutality. He funneled blood money through his kids to pay his taxes, sprinkled lies into a confession to build a legal trapdoor, and demanded the world pity him for the stress it all caused him.
It's just dark.
But based on everything we've unpacked, I want to leave you with one final chilling thought to chew on. Think back to that phone call where OJ bragged about leaving physical mistakes in the manuscript. The socks, the fence, the hat, specifically to prove the book was fiction.
Yeah.
If we follow his own twisted, manipulative logic to its natural conclusion. If we really just look at what he said, doesn't that mean the hyper-specific, terrifying details he didn't point out as mistakes are the absolute, unvarnished truth?